What if most psychology books are only telling you half the truth? Walk into any bookstore and you'll see shelves filled with titles promising happiness, confidence, better habits, emotional intelligence, better relationships, and success. They teach optimism, growth, kindness, productivity, discipline, but there is something they rarely talk about. Human nature is not built on goodness. It is built on survival. And survival does not care about fairness. It does not care about morality. It does not care about what sounds inspiring in a book. It cares about power, status, security, belonging, and control. Most psychology books focus on how people should behave. Very few explain how people actually behave when pressure, fear, competition, and insecurity are involved. And that gap matters. Because if you only understand the polished version of human behavior, you will constantly be confused by reality. You will wonder why good people lie, why loyal people betray, why kind people gossip, why confident people feel threatened, why intelligent people manipulate, why moral people justify immoral actions. The truth is uncomfortable. Humans are not driven primarily by logic. They are driven by emotion. And beneath emotion, they are driven by instinct. Every human being has two operating systems. The first is the conscious identity, the person you believe you are. The second is the survival system, the part of you that evolved long before civilization existed. The survival system is older, faster, stronger, and when those two systems conflict, the survival system wins. Psychology books teach you about values, but they rarely emphasize that values collapse under threat. Put someone in a situation where their status is challenged, their reputation is threatened, their resources are scarce, or their belonging is at risk, and you will see a completely different version of them. Not because they changed, because that version was always there. Human beings are extremely good at appearing rational. But rationality is often a story we tell after instinct has already acted. We like to believe we make decisions carefully. In reality, we make decisions emotionally, and then justify them logically. This is called post hoc rationalization. You feel first, you justify second, and most people never notice that process happening inside them. This is why debates rarely change minds. Because people are not defending ideas. They are defending identity. When someone argues aggressively, it is rarely about truth. It is about protecting the self-image they have built. Psychology books often tell you that humans seek happiness, but research shows something more fundamental. Humans seek certainty. Certainty feels safe. Uncertainty feels threatening. And when uncertainty increases, people become rigid. They cling to beliefs harder. They defend their tribe more aggressively. They reject information that challenges their worldview. This is not stupidity. This is survival. Your brain evolved in environments where uncertainty meant danger. So your mind prefers a false certainty over uncomfortable ambiguity. This is why conspiracy theories spread. This is why extreme ideologies grow. This is why people double down when proven wrong. Because being wrong threatens identity. And identity feels like survival. Another thing psychology books rarely emphasize is this. Humans are status-sensitive creatures. Status determines influence. Influence determines access. Access determines survival advantages. Even in modern society, status drives behavior more than most people admit. Why do people compete subtly in conversations? Why do they mention achievements casually? Why do they feel irritated when ignored? Why does social media trigger anxiety? Because visibility equals status, and status equals value in the social hierarchy. You may believe you don't care about status, but your nervous system does. It reacts instantly to social approval and rejection. A single negative comment can ruin your day. A single compliment can elevate your mood. That's not weakness. That's biology. Belonging was survival. Rejection was danger. So your brain treats social exclusion as a threat response. This is why humiliation feels unbearable. It activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Now here is something even more uncomfortable. Humans are not naturally self-aware. They are self-protective. Most people believe they know themselves, but they mostly know the version of themselves that feels acceptable. The parts that don't feel acceptable are hidden. Psychologist Carl Jung called this the shadow. The shadow contains everything about you that contradicts your identity. your envy, your insecurity, your desire for control, your capacity for selfishness, your capacity for cruelty. And the less you acknowledge your shadow, the more it controls you unconsciously. Projection is one of the most powerful psychological defenses. When you dislike something intensely in someone else, it often reflects something unresolved within yourself. But psychology books rarely emphasize how common this is. It is easier to sell positivity than self-confrontation. It is easier to tell people to think positive than to tell them they have suppressed aggression. But suppressed traits don't disappear. They leak through sarcasm, through passive aggression, through subtle dominance games, through moral superiority, through quiet resentment. Another truth rarely discussed clearly. Humans are deeply motivated by comparison, not absolute progress. Relative position. If you earn more than you did last year, but less than your peers, satisfaction drops. If you succeed privately but fail publicly, discomfort increases. Your brain evaluates success socially, not independently. This is why people sometimes sabotage others quietly. Not because they are evil, because relative loss feels threatening. And then there is power. Most people say they don't want power, but they want control over their environment, control over their image, control over their relationships, control over outcomes. Power is simply control scaled outward. And when people feel powerless, they compensate. They may gossip to regain influence. They may criticize to regain dominance. They may withdraw to regain emotional leverage. Understanding this changes how you interpret behavior. Instead of asking, why are they being difficult? You begin asking, what are they protecting? Because most negative behavior is protection disguised as personality. This is the part psychology books soften. Humans are not just growth-oriented beings. They are threat-detecting organisms. And threat perception shapes behavior far more than idealism does. If you start looking closely, you'll notice something most people never see. Many behaviors that look intentional are actually automatic. People don't always choose their reactions. Their nervous system chooses first. Their awareness catches up later. When someone snaps at you, it may look like anger. But underneath that anger is often fear. Fear of being disrespected. Fear of losing control. Fear of looking weak. Fear of being judged. Fear of being exposed. Anger is often just fear wearing armor. And once you see that, human behavior starts making more sense. One of the biggest misconceptions psychology books quietly avoid is this. People don't always want truth. They want emotional comfort. Truth is valuable only when it feels safe. If truth threatens identity, threatens belonging, or threatens self-image, the mind will resist it automatically. Not consciously, automatically. Your brain filters reality through protection systems. It deletes information that feels threatening. It distorts information that feels uncomfortable. It exaggerates information that feels validating. Not because you are irrational, because your brain is designed to keep your internal stability intact. This is why two people can witness the same event and remember it completely differently. Memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction. Each time you recall something, your brain edits it slightly based on your current emotions, beliefs, and expectations. Over time, the memory becomes less about what actually happened and more about what your mind believes happened. In other words, your past is partly rewritten by your present. Another truth most books soften is how naturally humans manipulate. Manipulation is often portrayed as something only villains do. But manipulation, in its simplest form, is influence with intention. Children learn it early. They cry differently depending on who is listening. They act differently depending on who is watching. They adjust behavior to get desired responses. They didn't read a manipulation manual. They learned it instinctively. Because influencing others increases chances of getting needs met. Adults do the same thing, just more subtly. Tone changes. Facial expressions shift. Words are chosen carefully. Stories are framed strategically. Silence is used intentionally. Most social interaction contains small elements of influence. Not always malicious. Often unconscious. The desire to influence others is not abnormal. It is social survival. Another uncomfortable truth is that morality is more flexible than people admit. Most people believe they are principled. But principles often bend under pressure. Change the situation, change the incentives, change the social environment, and behavior changes. History has shown repeatedly that ordinary individuals can act in extraordinary ways, both good and bad, depending on circumstances. This does not mean humans are evil. It means humans are adaptable. Your behavior is shaped as much by context as by character. And this is one of the most important insights about human nature. People are less fixed than they appear. Identity feels stable, but behavior is situational. That is why someone can be kind in one environment and harsh in another, confident in one group and insecure in another, honest in one moment and deceptive in another. Not because they are fake, because humans are responsive systems. They react to pressure, incentives, social signals, and perceived threats. Understanding this changes how you see people. You stop labeling quickly. You start observing patterns. Instead of assuming personality, you start examining environment. Because behavior is often environment expressed through a person. Another truth rarely explained clearly is how strongly humans need narratives. People don't just want events. They want stories. Stories create meaning. Meaning creates emotional stability. This is why the mind automatically builds explanations, even when it lacks full information. Your brain would rather invent a story than tolerate uncertainty. Uncertainty feels like danger. Stories feel like control. That's why people create interpretations instantly. Why they assume intentions. Why they jump to conclusions. Why they fill gaps with imagination. Not because they are careless, because their mind wants closure. And closure feels safe. There is also something deeper that most psychology discussions never fully confront. Self-deception. Humans don't just deceive others. They deceive themselves. Your mind edits your self-image constantly. It highlights traits you like. It downplays traits you don't. It remembers your successes clearly. It reframes your failures gently. It protects your identity. Because your identity is your psychological anchor. If that anchor feels unstable, your mind experiences distress. So your brain maintains stability by adjusting perception, not by adjusting reality. That is why self-awareness is rare. Not because it is difficult to understand yourself, but because it is uncomfortable to see yourself clearly. Real self-awareness requires noticing things about yourself that contradict your preferred identity. Your contradictions, your hidden motives, your subtle insecurities, your unconscious biases. And most people avoid that level of honesty because it feels threatening. But here is where everything changes. The people who develop real psychological strength are not the ones who believe they are purely good. They are the ones who understand they are capable of both good and bad. They acknowledge their impulses instead of denying them. They observe their reactions instead of blindly trusting them. They question their thoughts instead of immediately believing them. And that awareness gives them something rare: choice. Because when you see your patterns, you are no longer controlled by them automatically. You can still feel anger without acting on it. You can feel fear without obeying it. You can feel jealousy without hiding from it. You can feel insecurity without projecting it. Awareness does not remove your instincts. It gives you distance from them. And distance creates freedom. This is the truth most books skip. Human nature is not purely light or purely dark. It is layered, contradictory, adaptive, capable of kindness and cruelty, wisdom and blindness, honesty and self-deception. And the moment you stop expecting humans to be simple, they start making sense, including yourself. So the real question is not whether human nature is good or bad. The real question is whether you are willing to see it clearly. If this changed how you see people and yourself, subscribe for more psychology insights. Like the video and comment what realization stood out most to you.